from an external perspective with a male partner, there's an expectation that I need a tight vagina. Therefore, I need to do more kegels or more strengthening, more tightening, more squeezing because I want to please my partner. A tight vagina is not really what we want. That can be a contributor of pain. That can actually interfere with our capacity to participate in intimate activity, penetration, insert of sex, achieve orgasm. So we need that balance between some effort and some ease.
Welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna Podcast. This podcast is meant to encourage you to connect within so you can share your light with the world. And now, here's your host, Harrison Ma.
Welcome, beautiful souls, to another episode, another scheduled, reoccurring session here of the Cosmic Love Antenna. I am super in tune and connected today with today's beautiful guest that I'm going to intro for you in a second here. But I want to quickly explain for maybe new people tuning into this podcast, new people coming in and joining this chat, what exactly, what the Cosmic Lover Antenna is, because the beautiful guest I'll be introducing here in a second really highlights one of the key components of something I'm trying to promote. And very briefly, what the Cosmic Love Antenna is for new listeners is it's a connection within so we can shine our beautiful loving light out. So the connection of my self-love inside is generally contrasted and comparable to the love I share outside. And when it comes to our health, whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual, there are different dynamics that help us expand that loving light. There are different dynamics that help us express that loving light. And my guest today, Kim Vopni, is the OG Vagina Coach. She is a beautiful, powerful light that helps women in this world overcome incontinence, overcome prolapse, and is a master of pelvic health support and wellness, and fits into the Cosmic Love Antenna because she is in a niche that, in my opinion, needs to be expressed, needs to be talked about, needs to be channeled into the world a whole lot more. So with that, Kim, thank you for joining and welcome to the Cosmic Love Antenna.
Thank you so much. That was a beautiful introduction, and I'm really, really honored and excited to be here with you today. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome, Kim. And as people listening are probably already aware, a lot of my guests that I bring onto the podcast thus far have been from Clubhouse, of connections on Clubhouse. And, Kim, I just want to say as we start this chat, you're such a beautiful person doing so many beautiful things in this world. And it was such a, it was not even a second thought of, bringing you onto this to have a chat, because I know the work that you're doing in the world is not just important, but it's a way for you to express your love at such a deep level. So with that, I guess I want to ask you the obvious question that I'm sure you get all the time. Where did the moniker or the title of the Vagina Coach come from? What was its origin story?
Yes, I do get asked that all the time because it's certainly not a job title that you think about growing up, with aspirations of being. But
imagine, and sorry to interrupt you, Kim, but imagine the world if it was more like that.
If it was, yeah. It's so true. Yeah. So, I mean, I can go all the way back to 6th grade where I saw a childbirth video, and that was sort of my introduction to, oh my gosh, I don't think that's for me. And it planted a seed of, I'm not ever going to have babies. However, I still went through life looking at my mom and my aunts and my grandma and all the women in my life and watching them and thinking, hey, well, they did it and they're still walking around and doing things. But then I also did see my mom, who started to avoid running, and she was complaining of chronic back pain. And no matter how much exercise she did, her tummy wasn't what she wanted it to be. And then she had surgery for incontinence. So it sort of affirmed what I thought. And then again, it just was like, okay, no, I'm not doing this. But I met my husband, decided I did want to start a family, and I was really determined to have a different story than my mom.
And Kim, let me jump in here super quick, because I'm just interested. And this is one of the things I want to hone in on today, and then we'll get to it soon after this. But I'm wondering, you growing up in that childhood dynamic, you talked about the parents. I'm wondering if you feel comfortable, what what was your relationship like with the sexual being that you were? More specifically, maybe the structural sexual organs growing up. What was it like for you maybe before you headed into this kind of work?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was, my mom was an OR nurse, a nurse. She was very open. She used proper anatomical terms with my brother and I. She told us the body parts, how they worked. We learned at a very young age. I remember she had books that she used. She also told us. And at the time, when you're young or when you're kind of in young teens, it's a bit cringy when your parents are having the talk with you, right? But looking back, I feel very grateful because it was just part of learning. And I also questioned why we weren't learning about that in school. So I think that I had a healthy introduction to proper anatomy, proper function. I wouldn't say she went deep into sexual wellness or sexuality. So I would say that was a part that I was exploring on my own, had curiosities. I remember my parents had that book that I'm now forgetting the name of. It was kind of like the Bible at the time.
Sex at Dawn? Wasn't Sex at Dawn by any chance?
I forget it. I'll have to reflect back. Anyway, I remember them having it, and it was, so I would sneak in and I would flip through, and it was sort of like, and that was kind of like my early sex education, I guess. So I think that it was something we were welcomed to ask questions. It was not taboo. I wouldn't say it was necessarily openly talked about either, but it wasn't something that we were punished for or that we had to hush whisper about everything. So I feel like that was something that has now enabled me to have these conversations in a way that I'm very frank, I'm very open. I share openly because I think that just like with my children, I taught them that this is the nose and this is the elbow. I wasn't going to call their penis, they're both boys. I wasn't going to call their penis some code name either, right?
How did you overcome, if you did, how did you overcome the cringiness that you just talked about with your parents? How did you overcome that with your children, if that was even possible?
It wasn't ever cringy with them. They have felt a little cringe, I think, but because their whole life they have been exposed to, I've had, pelvis models and vulva puppets and clitoris paraphernalia all over. And I've explained what it is and they know what I do. Once they became teens and had their own social media. And of course, my husband and I follow because, from a safety and teaching them,
yep,
how to navigate internet and social media and all that kind of stuff. But they were hesitant for me to comment because my handle is Vagina Coach. And,
yeah,
it could be, some people could question if they didn't necessarily look, it could appear, what is this? What's he following?
Yeah.
What's he looking at? So I appreciate that. And that was their cringiness, but they both also appreciate that it is what I'm doing is not, it's not something that there's shame around or taboo or there shouldn't be. And I'm hoping that it will translate so that when they are then, both of them at this point seem to be heterosexual. And when they are in relationships with other women, that it will actually benefit them. And when they maybe have families, and I'm hoping that it will translate to improving their knowledge. I
think that's what's most powerful here. And again, this is going to come up. This is what I really want to channel here in our chat today, Kim. This idea, and I'm sure you've heard me talking about this, or if people listening, you've heard me speak on other episodes about the power of the inner child, right? Inner child healing. And we often overlook the sexual expression and the healthy sexual education and the healthy sexual deep dive that us as children, us as adolescents, us as young adults moving through that period, there is a balance. There is a fine balance. Just like it can be overly sexualized. You talked about some of the things on the internet and porn. There can also be an under-sexualization, right? If we don't have if the guilt and the shame that you just spoke of, right? If there's guilt and shame around healthy sexual expression across all spectrums, physical, emotional, all the elements, then that is going to lead to developmental, challenges. So what I think is wonderful about the work that you do, Kim, and what you promote is this healthy balance, right? Is this healthy conversation to begin? Because a lot of us, I'm sure maybe even people listening, weren't able to have that conversation, weren't able to. You talked about the cringiness. That is the norm, right? The cringiness is the norm that we just go back into. And it seems to be sort of, there is a cringiness, but then we're also very happy to talk about pornography, right? We have both ends of the extreme. Does that resonate?
Yeah, for sure. And pornography is something that is something it's so prevalent. Like that has almost become the sex education in a way, right? And these kids are exposed to it at such a young age. And really, we could say, and my husband and I talked about this at length, we could not allow our kids to have phones, but how many other of their friends have phones? Like they're not going to get away from it. So our job is to expose them to it and to explain it and to, really that's it. Is just tell them what it is, that it's acting, that it's this, and that it's not what is a true expression. And so we can do our best, and we talk about it continuously, and the boys are open. Like I have two sons. They're both very open. They, I feel like they've navigated it quite well so far. They're almost 18 and 15. So I don't know.
They're very, I think about what it must be like to be your sons, Kim. And, as a man myself growing up, and you talked about the pornography, that was definitely a big part of my education. And it is about meeting them now as technology becomes more ubiquitous and entrenched in everything. It's sort of like running in front of the tsunami tidal wave of just content. And you as the parent, you just got to be there with love and openness and truth, and then sort of not pushing, but providing the plate of education, and then letting them come up and, feed on it.
Yeah.
Then they have that armor, sort of that loving armor of understanding. So when the tsunami does inevitably hit them, they're like, oh, I know this is what's happening. This is, it's making me feel this certain way. This is what's going on. Kim, I want to shift here a little bit. I want to go back to more of your story because I'm just so interested in it. And I want to hit on specifically, I know that you started your career, or part of your career, as a personal trainer, right? You started as a PT, and much like myself, I started my practitioner sort of journey as a personal trainer. And I'm wondering, as a personal trainer, for people listening that are interested in, maybe they're at their physical part of their wellness journey, they're incorporating their physical body, they're improving it. How did this journey for you sort of unfold? Where did you start seeing as a personal trainer that, maybe there's a need here to focus in on the pelvic floor, as an example?
Mm-hmm. So I had I had an initial start of personal training, which was right after university. And I was a trainer for 6-7-ish years, and I was doing everything. I worked from, the elderly population in the pool doing aquafit and osteofit classes to boxer fit and boot camps. Like I was kind of on both extremes and everything in between. And I loved it, but at the same time, I was not a specialist in anything. I was just sort of a general movement person. And I knew what I knew from my basic personal training certification. And I left because I was feeling burnt out. I was teaching classes. I was traveling to different gyms. I was training clients. Like it was enough. And I decided to go into the corporate world. So I did that. And that's where I met my husband, got married, decided I want to start a family. And there was a biofeedback device that I had used in my pregnancy. And after I used that and had a good experience, I thought, I think the whole world should know about this product. So that's kind of how it's
Kim, can you explain what the biofeedback is? Because I understand that, but for people listening, what is it and how was it implemented?
It's a product manufactured in Germany. It's called the Epino, and Epino stands for no episiotomy. And an episiotomy is where it used to be common practice. Thankfully, it's only typically done in an emergency now, but it's where the tissue between the vagina and the anus is cut during childbirth with the aim of creating more space. So it was well intended, but what was happening was it was creating more severe tears, more severe injuries, more pain, difficult recovery. And so thankfully it's not done routinely anymore. That's what my mom experienced. It was just common practice that everybody had their perineum cut. So this product was designed to help.
Just interrupt you, Kim. I'm just imagining that as not only does the physical not only does the physical image of it cause sensations in me, but just maybe we'll get into this a bit later, but just the energetic and emotional part of that, just I'm sure maybe you've talked about it with your mother, but I'm sure that has an impact, right? I'm sure that has impact on the procedure and, how it's,
on everything, on the mother, on the baby, on everything. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sorry, keep going.
So this product is it's a silicone balloon. It's attached to a tube that then attaches to a gauge that looks like a blood pressure gauge. And on that gauge, there is a little handle where you pump it and it adds air into the balloon. So when it's in balloons, it's a silicone. It's not like a thin balloon that you would get at a party store. So that's inserted into the vagina. Once you've added a bit of air to it, you can then use your muscles to contract and relax and then see what happens on the gauge. So it gives you some feedback as to, am I contracting? Am I relaxing? Am I having more difficulty relaxing? Am I having more difficulty sustaining that contraction? So it gives you some education. And then in the last few weeks of pregnancy, you add an additional component to the training, which is called perineal massage, where the balloon is left in there after you've done your contract, relax. You add a bit more air to the point where you feel some stretch, some discomfort. And the goal of it is to help kind of mimic some of the sensations, obviously to a lesser degree, that you will face during birth, so that you can learn how to respond, how the pelvic floor can respond in a way that is, not like, when you feel pain or when you're nervous, you usually constrict and contract. And birth is an elimination, and we need those muscles to relax and allow this babe to come into the world. Yeah. And so
it's interesting, Kim, let me flow in here.
Yeah.
And maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I imagine, as I don't have a partner, I'm a male. So I haven't been around any female that has moved through the birth process, but I can imagine in the normal allopathic sort of, traditional medicine model of someone going into the hospital to then, give birth. I think a big part of it is sort of giving and pushing a lot of our power into the machines or the practitioner or the medications for those things to control and to take support and foundation of the process, which sounds totally different to what you're saying. What you're saying is you're helping an individual so their own body can be the answer to that rather than an external force. Is that an accurate analysis?
1,000%. Yeah. Birth is something that is, when I think back to my mom's experience and many other in that time, a lot of them were sedated. A lot of them weren't necessarily even fully conscious or aware of what was happening. And it was something that birth was something that was almost done to you. You weren't an active participant in, and it still happens now where everyone just, I'll just, whatever the doctor says, they must know. And I think the allopathic medicine is fantastic when we have emergencies, when we have accidents. I don't think they are necessarily our best ally for preventive wellness for things like normal physiological birth support. Some are, I don't want to discount that, but typically it's not within their model. They view things as something they need to come in and help or fix. And when we need that, it's great. But during birth, it takes, as you say, it takes the power away from that person. And
that's the word. You said it just, as soon as all of what you were just saying, I was like nodding and agreeing, but it's power. That's, as you're listening to this today, as Kim is just beautifully sharing her story and these insights, I want you to keep coming back to that word, right? What does it look like for me in general as a being, but specifically we're talking about the female body and the vagina and this whole area. What does it look like for me to be in power in this place? What does it look like? What does it feel like for me to be in power across all spectrums, right? The physical, the emotional, many wings. So I think you're hitting on it here. You're hitting on it here, Kim, is that. And so let's go back. I derail you because this is so interesting. The feedback, so that you found this device in your PT journey. And so what was that? So was this like an awakening, a moment? Was this like, oh, this is something that I need to do more of?
Yeah, it became, I was applying the principles of fitness, the principles of training. I'm preparing for an event. So if I had a client who was training for a marathon, there would be a periodization that I would take them through of different levels of training specific to the event. There would be strength, there would be endurance, there would be power, there would be release and relaxation, there would be rest. And then just before the event, there would be a period of tapering off. And then there would be the performance, like going to the event. And then after that, there would be a period of rest and recovery. And I view birth very much the same. So when I used this product and I started telling others about it, I was reflecting back to, well, when I was a personal trainer, I was like, okay, I think I need to become a personal trainer again and specialize and learn more about the pelvic floor. And so that was the instigator. And I had an e-commerce store with a bunch of different products. I learned about pelvic floor physical therapy. So I had never heard of that before. And they started referring their patients and clients to me. So then I learned more about what they did. And I thought, just like I thought with the Epino, how is it that not everybody knows about this? I learned what they did. And I said, how is it that not every birthing person is not seeing a pelvic floor physical therapist during their pregnancy and afterwards? It should just be standard of care. And then I formed a second.
The big question mark in like, why isn't this happening at culture in large? Why isn't this happening? Why aren't more people talking about it? What that urge, that birthing process. Let me just add this here, Kim, because it's so interesting. I think we all have this journey that you're talking about. Your journey is very obviously nuanced to you, but I'm listening to your words and reflecting on my past, and both the sort of tool that you discovered with the epitome and the feedback device, and then the channeling of your expression through that tool, realizing, oh, this is actually what I really want to be doing right now. This is what my innate voice right now in this moment needs to be speaking. Because I know, and maybe you'll get to this in a bit, Kim, I don't know where did it factor in when you started actually taking on the Vagina Coach? Was this soon after?
That was actually quite a bit later. Yeah. So initially, when I had the e-commerce store, and I was now, my intention was I recertified in personal training. I was specializing in pre-postnatal, learning about pelvic floor, working with pelvic floor physical therapists. And at the time, I was helping people prepare for birth because that was such a missed opportunity. A lot of people want to fix a problem that exists. I wanted to try to help people prevent the problem in the first place, which I ended up finding out was actually quite difficult because more people are motivated to fix a problem that exists. But so my first program was called Prepare to Push, and that still exists now. And that was me combining my training as a trainer. And then also I trained as a birth doula, and I put those together, and my brand was Fitness Doula. And so I was working with pregnant women and people, and that's kind of how it started. And then I formed a second business called Bellies Inc. with 2 other women. We were focusing on the postpartum recovery and optimizing that and taking inspiration from other cultures that use wrapping. And we were adding our own wrap to exercise. And Vagina Coach happened once. So as I said, my kids are now almost 18 and 15. And when I started my business, they were just little. They were little monkeys. I was in that world of, new motherhood. And then I started to move into perimenopause. Now I'm almost in menopause. And Fitness Doula was more of a pregnancy birth.
You shifted.
Well, I shifted. I guess I expanded. So what I recognized was this conversation of pelvic health is not just pregnancy. It's not just postpartum recovery. It's all stages. And there's people who've never been pregnant before who have the same problems. And so I knew I needed a change. And I was speaking to a group, it was a mompreneur. It was called the Mompreneur Conference in Toronto. And this group of, 300 women and they were all entrepreneurs, and all the speakers were some sort of a business coach. And I had written a blog post for the magazine, and it was called How Optimizing Your Pelvic Health Can Make You a Better Mompreneur. And it was selected to be a presentation. So when I came up on stage, I just joked and I said, all right, everybody, my name's Kim Vopni, and now you have a Vagina Coach for your business, because everybody else had been some sort of a coach. And so it was a joke, but as soon as it came out, it was like,
how did it feel? Yeah. Tell me about it. It was
like, I almost needed to write it down as I was up there, because all of a sudden it was like, that's it. So in the back of my mind, I was like, that's the name. And that's how it came to be.
So thank you for sharing the story, Kim. And I hope, listeners tuning in, you're really noticing and comparing, maybe if you're a practitioner, maybe if you're maybe just someone that's looking to find more of your mission in the world, there is a journey to this, right? There is a step process. And it's always so, I find it very,
an evolution.
Yeah, it's an evolution, but it's also very, I find it difficult when people tell me, you look back and you see you see the steps. It's like, in hindsight, it makes sense. But it's in the moment that we sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed that nothing really is moving the way that we want it to move. But I just want to acknowledge and empower everyone listening that, take Kim as a beautiful example of what is possible. Take Kim as a beautiful example of not what is only possible in the sort of pelvic health world, which we're going to get more into here in a second, but just what it looks like, someone finding their powerful voice, right? And be open to how that path is directed, right? And feel those moments. That's why I wanted to ask you, Kim, how that channel and that moment of that seemingly random experience, it made sense to you. It connected, it brought everything together.
Yeah. And something so I'm going to interrupt you. But
go.
Something that you just said there was, it took a while to also find comfort in like standing in power in that word and using that term. And even in the business. So in the second business I formed, Bellies Inc., we created a certification course. We also saw that void that we'd learn nothing about the pelvic floor in personal training. And we learned every single other muscle in the body, but nothing about the pelvic floor. And it's the foundation of the core, and it's where our power center. So anyway, we create this course. And initially, there was three of us. We're all women. We'd all given birth. One of them was a pelvic floor PT, and we had our own pelvic floor issues that we actually didn't really share very openly at the beginning, because it was almost like we had this sense that we needed to be the ones who had done it perfectly, and now we're going to show you the way. And when we started to share our own journeys, that we had experienced incontinence, that we'd experienced prolapse, that we'd had tearing, then all of a sudden we were even more relatable to people, and they didn't look at us like, oh, well, then you failed, so why should I follow you? It was like, you've been there, you know what I feel, you appreciate it, and I therefore trust you more. Yeah.
Yeah. We are powerful spiritual beings, but we are also human beings. And how that human being works is that it's very attractive to us to be in a tribe, to be in a community, to be in a collective of like-minded individuals that are not only doing the things that we're doing, but have been through the pains that we've been through. So we don't feel alone. And I think that's a big part, not just of the entrepreneurial sort of finding a niche, finding a business story. It's the human condition in general. But so it's never weak. It's never a sign of inferiority. Yes, the spiritual being is unlimited in many ways, but the human being does need community, does need support, does need family to heal and grow. With that, Kim, let's shift a little bit here. We have a foundation of your beautiful story and what you do in the world. I want to pick your brain now to give value to people listening around sort of pelvic health and, the Vagina Coach health and all of these elements. And I think some of these areas you speak to quite fluently, and I'm feeling that maybe some of these areas we could challenge and test, and we could go a bit deeper together. So let's start maybe seemingly, surface level and talk about. I'm interested, one, in the power of kegels, because this is something that I have some awareness of, but haven't fully dived into. So I'm wondering. I want you to sort of lean into two things here. One, let's talk a bit about kegels and why they're so powerful for pelvic, vagina health in general. And I also would love to hear your perspective of the masculine within this. So whether it is an actual physical man helping a female with her pelvic, vagina health, or if this is relevant to men at all. Well, I'm wondering what your thoughts are. So let's flow from there.
Mm-hmm. So if anybody has heard anything about pelvic health or the pelvic floor, usually it has been the term kegel or kegel. And a kegel is a form of pelvic floor exercise. It is typically what most people assume is the only thing. So if I have a pelvic floor problem, I need to do kegels to fix my problem. And it's often, if they seek help from a family physician, that's typically one of the first lines of defense that will be offered as a solution. And it's a good one. It can work, but there's missing elements there. So there's nowhere in our life have we been told about the pelvic floor. Nowhere in our education have we been told about the influences to specifically the female pelvis. So men have a pelvic floor as well. We who are born with female anatomy, we have an additional opening. We have a uterus. The shape of the pelvis is different. We can grow and birth babies, like all these other things. We menstruate, we go through menopause, like all these things that place additional challenge, I guess I would say, to the pelvic floor, but we've never been told. And so we also then we grow up and we might have issues along the way. We may not. Pregnancy and childbirth are major points of life where things can happen. But then we have media that is sharing messages that it's normal to leak and you just put a pad on. And so we have this like, well, we know that there's a problem. It doesn't feel very good. I don't know. I'm kind of ashamed, but it looks like it's normal. So maybe it's like, I don't know, I guess I'd have to put up with it. So
if I'm looking at it at all, right?
Exactly.
If I'm looking at it at all.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt there, Kim, but that I think is a challenge in itself, right? You talked about media normalizing these symptoms and issues, but media and the world in general also normalizes a disconnect from the center at large.
Yes, exactly. So if we seek help at all, there's some research to show it's usually on average 6.5-ish, 7 years before somebody seeks help, and then they will see their family physician. And again, I don't mean any disrespect to that. However, in my opinion, pelvic floor physical therapy is our best first line of defense. So I always go back to equating it to a dentist. And when we were young, we were told that we need to brush our teeth. I remember even having dentists come into our classroom in grade school and show us how to brush our teeth properly and how to floss. And then we see the dentist once or twice a year for a checkup. And we go because we've been told to, and we go for preventive checkups. It is a checkup. And if we had been told about when we're learning about sexual health, when we're learning about menstruation, if we were told about the pelvic floor, all the different influences, why it's so important to care for it, and that we have these practitioners called pelvic floor physical therapists who are specialists in pelvic health, and you would start seeing them, when you become sexually active is usually when I recommend, or before that, if you had some major issue. I think the world would change if we had that knowledge, and we would be told what a Kegel exercise is. And we would have somebody who has been teaching and evaluating our pelvic floor along the way so that it's less likely that these other things can become challenges. So there's lots of things that can still contribute. It's not like Kegels are going to prevent everything, but it's not a blanket statement that's going to fix everything. And most people do them incorrectly. So we need more. And
Kim, going back to the conversation we had about the pregnancy and being in the hospital, what I've noticed in bringing in physical modalities, whether it's just exercise or lifting weights, whether it is all more specific with the pelvic floor with Kegels, one of the things that all sort of physical modalities have in common is that awareness aspect, right? When you start lifting things or moving muscles, whether they're exterior or interior, you bring awareness to the body at large. Mm-hmm. And this is where we're going to go in a sec soon, but I'll give a little tease here. That awareness that in itself can be enough for things to move, right? So things, we'll get into emotions and energetics here in a second, but if you are moving through something in that pelvic area and you've spent so long disconnected from it, you've spent so long just sort of pushing it to the side, not pretending it's there or pretending it's not there, then the awareness is the opposite of that. The awareness is creating a space for the things to flow. And I say that both very intentionally with the pun, but also energetically and emotionally. First, does that resonate? Kim, does that?
Absolutely. And that's always the very first place to start is we have to help somebody connect with that part of the body. It's not, we can see our external genitalia, our vulva, which not everybody even knows the difference between a vulva and a vagina. So we have to kind of educate about anatomy, and then also use cueing, use visualization, use, imagery, whatever we can to help people access this group of muscles that we can't see.
Yeah.
Right. And there can be reasons why there's a disconnect. It could be trauma. It could be that it's always been taboo and not something you don't talk about. Shame, embarrassment, all sorts of emotion is tied to it. And that in and of itself alone can be the barrier that we need to break down.
The T word. I was waiting for it to come up. I want to get to that. We'll get to that next, but just before, because I want men listening to this to connect in. So I'm wondering if you could just maybe briefly describe, in your experience, Kim, what is the role of the masculine in this conversation? Either, and you can answer this either as the interior masculine of the female, or the exterior masculine of a partner, a physical partner, maybe helping a woman, understand this and go deeper into this world. What are your thoughts around this?
I'll answer it both, I think. So if I think about fitness, so the length of time that I've been in the fitness industry is, a long time, 20, 30 years. And over that time, I've seen an evolution of things becoming...
The age in which I am, Kim, just so you know.
It's starting to change now, but for a long time, things were harder, more intense, the ab ripper 9, I make up names, but everything got harder. And so as we became less active as a population, as we became more sedentary, as we outsourced more things, our fitness had to make up for that. So it became more intense to make up for the fact that we were not moving as much. And so there was also what I called kind of like a masculinization of fitness, where things like CrossFit and boot camp and the feminist movement of we can do that. We're okay. And I look at that and say, absolutely. Yeah. We can do a lot of things. We can lift heavy shit. We can do stuff. However, we need to honor that we have menstrual cycles. We need to honor that we have hormone fluctuations, that we birth babies. And maybe not all of that, even though we could do it, maybe it's not, maybe it's not suitable. Maybe it is, but we need a little bit more.
Well, I wouldn't even say suitable, Kim, just to make this very clear for people. It's about the balance. Right. Yes, all of us. So when I say masculine and feminine, just make this clear, whether I'm a physical male or a physical female, I have both a masculine and a feminine inside of me. And when Kim is talking about the overdoing of the chronic cardio and spending 7 days of the week at the gym and lifting the weights, whether you're a man or a woman, that is unhealthy, right? If that is all you're doing, if you're not spending time working in, contrasted to the working out, right? There's going to be a metaphorical, energetic, physical, emotional, spiritual wall that you eventually hit. Keep on.
And Kegels are the same thing. So people think of a Kegel as a squeeze. And if I squeeze more or if I squeeze harder, that must be better. So there's the interpretation again that harder is better and more is better, just like harder and more in fitness must make me stronger. And we're forgetting about the ease. I always say yin yang yoni. We need a balance between the activation and the relaxation or the release. And then when I think about from an external perspective with a male partner, there's an expectation that I need a tight vagina. Therefore, I need to do more Kegels or more strengthening, more tightening, more squeezing because I want to please my partner. Right? There's that. Or it could also be like, there are also people that say, well, I don't feel the sensation anymore. So I want to do it for myself, which great. And it's okay to want to do something for your partner as well. However, we have to appreciate that a tight vagina is not really what we want. That can be a contributor of pain. That can actually interfere with our capacity to participate in intimate activity, penetration, insert of sex, achieve orgasm. So we need that balance between some effort and some ease. And I think right now, and this is what I'm noticing is changing in fitness, there is a lot more ease that's starting to come into the fitness world. I think because everyone's realizing, well, that was a everyone's back.
Everyone's hitting a wall. Everyone's having adrenal. Everyone's having thyroid challenges. Everyone's having leaky gut. I want to tie a little bow back to something we talked about before with raising children and healthy sexual expression. That's what pornography is. Pornography is the hyper masculinization of the act of sex.
Yes.
Right. So this is not just a exercise theme. The masculine energy, which deserves to be in balance. I'm not saying that we need to just condone and push away the masculine, because then we'd have an imbalance in the other direction, right? We need balance. We need awareness, and the pornography and the hypersexualization of the sort of just getting stuff in and done and tight and quick and come and finish. That is just the hyper extension of the masculine. So we need to take a step back in all ways here. Kim, I want to thank you for answering this, and that went into some interesting little alleys that I'm happy that you spoke to. But let's keep it going. Let's go deeper here now that we've set the stage with the energetics. Let's speak about the energetic and emotional side of the pelvic floor, of the pelvic area, of the vagina area, of the genital area. And I'm interested. Well, first question, Kim, how much of this is your work, right? I know that a big part is structural from what you do with the pelvic floor and the prolapse. I'm wondering how much of the work that you do in the world, you notice some of the trauma elements, the energetic elements, the emotional guilt and shame elements of this area.
Mm-hmm. It's not as it is part, it comes up, I would say, in my work. It's not where my expertise lies. And typically I work with other practitioners who are trauma informed and I don't want to say outsourcing, but referring and collaborating with those people. So I will touch on those. I ask questions in my health history questionnaire, and I go as far as the person will share, and also as far as I feel comfortable supporting, because it does play a role. It's important information to know. And it's also important for the person to understand that is a contributing factor that needs to be addressed. So my work is more in uncovering reasons that could be contributing, reasons beyond I gave birth, reasons beyond, I was in a car accident, that type of thing, but other reasons that could be contributing to whatever it is that person is dealing with: incontinence or prolapse, pain with sex, low back pain, what have you. And in some of my, blogs or teaching, I might share a little bit more in depth with regards to, say, a more spiritual approach, like thinking about the chakras, even though that's not where I have extensive training within it.
I'm happy you're saying this, Kim, because not only as someone who is trauma informed, I know you know this, but just for people out there, if you haven't picked up on it already, this is kind of the world I like to live in. And I'm happy you said that you kind of can't not deal with it. Like it's not your specialty. And, we stand in our power, but we also stand in a tribe. So it's very powerful as a practitioner to realize that, a master of all is a master of none, right? We work on the thing that makes our light shine, and then we work with the community, with other people that have their own lights that shine. Yeah. But it's also very powerful to realize that we are holistic beings. So if you are someone that is working from a physical lens of the pelvic floor area, from the vagina area, then you're not just going to be dealing with physical elements of it. And I want to make this clear here for people listening. Each energetic center, just a quick little overview, if you haven't heard me speak to this before, each energetic center, each chakra is connected to a physiological part in the body, and the sacral center is mainly the area that's connected to this genital area. We could talk about the root too, but mainly I've noticed it's the sacral center. And this is what I want to speak more with you on, Kim, is each energetic center, each chakra, generally corresponds to emotion and particular energy. Emotion is energy in motion. And two particular emotions, feelings, sensations that generally hold themselves in the pelvic area and when we say hold, I'm saying not express. When we suppress these emotions, either from a trauma, an event, a belief, etc. These two are guilt and shame. And we've talked about them already, but I want to go deeper now into this, Kim. What do you think are the impact of these two emotions, feelings on vagina health, on pelvic health in general?
Huge. They have a huge impact. And so I can even add into their fear. So guilt and shame, we can have guilt for, I didn't do my pelvic floor exercise, so now I'm here. I didn't birth correctly. I didn't do something correctly in my birth. Now I'm here. I'm not satisfying my partner. So there's guilt on so many different levels. even, mom guilt, all sorts of things, right? Guilt on that.
Guilt of having a vagina. Guilt of what is that thing down there that I am not looking at, and that is having weird, sensations, having weird substances. Guilt around the actual thing in general.
Yes. Yep. Exactly. And then there's also the shame, embarrassment piece, which can be from either, growing up, it wasn't something you talk about. It wasn't something you learned. We were always told it was hush hush. It was not inappropriate. I even think about now, I'm doing advertising for a free webinar that I'm launching. I have a photo of myself holding my pelvis, and that's not appropriate. So we have ads that get banned. We can say things like Viagra on the subway, but we can't say anything about, female sexual wellness or, so there's lots of things in there. That's a really big conversation, but so much emotion.
And Kim, I'll define this for people. Guilt and shame, I think there are many people have different perspectives on it, but just maybe to ground something, guilt is I did something bad. Shame is I am bad, right? So you can see how these two feelings, sensations, emotions around pelvic, sexual, vagina, penis, awareness in general can be very stagnant and disempowering and empowering once we can release. This is what I want to ask you now here, Kim. A big part of what I teach around emotional health is just the awareness that we've been talking about this whole time, and creating a space for the energy and the emotion to flow, to be expressed, to be channeled. I'm wondering, in the work that you do, have you ever noticed any of this release? Have you ever noticed any of this channeling occurring, whether it's with a specific Kegel exercise, whether it's with the feedback device that we were talking about before? Have you noticed any sort of releases either with yourself or with clients?
Yeah. It's everything. It's where I start with everyone is a release. We have to release in order to be able to access. So let's release the tension. Let's release the fear. Let's release the emotion. Let's release whatever it is that's holding us back from being able to access, to connect with, to move, to whatever. So as I said before, with yin yang yoni and balance between effort and ease, a lot of people, again, associate if they have a problem, they need more strength, but they may have stuckness. They may have some overactivity, and we need to release that. And I find that that's the norm. Even people that may not have the stuckness, I think releasing allows the flow that you talk about, where one of my favorite exercises is called the posterior pelvic floor release. And you can use a tennis ball, you can use a small apple, you could use a squishy lacrosse ball. And I have a YouTube video about it if you want, but you sit on it basically, and you don't just sit on the ball, but it's placed in between the anus and the sits bone, sitting in a place where you can close your eyes, connect in with it. A lot of people will feel discomfort, and they'll probably be sitting like they're sitting on a ball. And that the purpose is really to, acknowledge that resistance that you feel. Why is it there? Is it because of habitual posture? Is it because of fear? Is it because of shame? Whatever, all those things. Yeah. And so having people acknowledge what they feel when they're doing it, what sort of resistance comes up, giving them visualization, giving them breath work, and seeing if we can let those muscles surrender and find ease, even though we have that discomfort. And that's a big teaching thing from a birth perspective. But even when you're not pregnant, we need to access and let go so things can flow and we can activate again.
And this is not, I'm just listening. I was visualizing that exercise, and I might have to try it, Kim. It's very powerful. And so a couple of things I want to say here. This is not just a female thing. This is, when we're talking about the guilt and shame around the sexual area, this is as much relevant for males as it is for females. Yeah. And I want to just expand briefly here on your body truly keeps score, right? Your body, from an energetic and emotional traumatic experience, a way that our body helps us move through it. So maybe it's not too overwhelming. Maybe for whatever reason, we didn't feel safe enough to express in that moment of trauma. The body will hold on to these emotions for one point in the future, so to help us release and to help us channel. So the actual tissue itself, if the tissue is stimulated, much like you're explaining here, Kim, the tissue could actually release not just the tension of the physical cells of the muscle, but actually release energetic emotion. Mm-hmm. So it's so important that you have that discussion for the energy to flow, because just simply sitting on a ball and moving it around your anus and genital area, even just me imagining that for myself, I'm already feeling some emotions coming up and I'm not even doing anything. I don't even have the thing there. So I want to promote that for everyone listening. And it's always good to work with someone like Kim, or myself, or who you feel called to, so the container is safe enough for you to release, right? Because that's the other side of this. That's the root perspective. We often don't channel and express those emotions because that safety, security, and support hasn't been there before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if we get it in an external, it's easier to do. Does that resonate, Kim?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think about, some people say they've seen people who will spontaneously cry in a yoga class. Yeah. And I've never seen it. It's never happened to me. However, this is many years ago. I had a bulging disc in my neck. I was having a massage and releasing tension, and the therapist pressed on one spot in my neck. And I, all of a sudden I welled up in tears, and there was no image that came to mind. There was no, I saw nothing. I felt nothing other than just like tears welling up. And I started crying, and I said, I don't know why I'm crying, but I just am. So that was exactly what you're talking about. And it was what I had never witnessed before. And in all my clients, I've only ever had one client that has experienced that during that ball release exercise, where it was the same thing, where all of a sudden the tears started rolling down their neck or their face. And I wasn't in a position to be able to help them go deeper to explore that, but I referred them on to one of my colleagues to explore deeper. So acknowledged it. Yeah. It's normal. It can happen. And it's actually a very positive thing. And it's a step forward to healing. And then
not only positive, it's healing, right? So
yes,
I love this topic. And just because I want to make this as clear as possible for everyone. Yes, you may need further help. Yes, there may be some memories that come up and it might pull up a certain deeper wound, but you may not, right? Yeah. That inkling, that lower back pain that's been there for ages, that neck cramp, that shoulder tension, that irritable bowel, that erectile dysfunction, we could keep going. The last straw that was needed to maybe help that move through you could be that emotional release. So I want to just promote that for everyone listening, and to lean into it if you are working with someone, and be open-minded, open-hearted to what that looks like. Kim, I have a couple more questions here before we finish. And the next one I sort of want to get your beautiful love and insight and perspective on is, you have, with this shift into the Vagina Coach and this beautiful little vagina bat signal that you put out into the world, it's brought in a big community that you now, on Instagram, on Facebook, on Clubhouse, you have quite a large following. And I'm interested in what you've noticed the impact of community is around specifically sort of vagina health and pelvic floor health. How has the tribe element, and we've talked about a little bit today, but I want to niche down here. How has the tribe element impacted people's health, people's connection, people's awareness with this, beautiful, important area?
Mm-hmm. Social media, some days I really would love to just turn everything off and never see it again. I have a love-hate relationship with it. However, I do know that it has played a huge role in increasing awareness and giving people a platform to share stories and to help educate and to increase awareness. So I hear almost daily from somebody who says, I never knew this. Thank you so much for sharing. I had no idea that, whatever. And so it's whether it's a private message or somebody commenting on a post, it's changing lives. And I don't just mean me. There was a hashtag, and I don't even know who created this, but somebody in the pelvic health realm created a hashtag way back in the day called Pelvic Mafia. And I don't think as many people use it anymore, but it was a way at the beginning for us to find other practitioners like ourselves, but also for us to say to clients, use this and find other people who are talking about this, because it's not just me, it's all of us. And the more people you have refer to learn from, the more your awareness is going to increase. So I still use it. I'm grateful for it on most days because it has helped so many people. And it's allowed me to form a business, which I'm grateful for, and really do what I love. I cannot imagine doing anything else. I can't imagine going back to what I did before. And I feel incredibly grateful to help as many people as I do. And I cherish the people that message me to thank me or to just share their story and say, I had no idea and you've helped me do this. Or I remember when I had a pelvic surgery, which was something that I was really afraid to share with my community. And I had battled with that decision for about 4 years. And then I did it and I shared it on social. And I think it was the same day, maybe the next day, another pelvic health practitioner messaged me and said, I just had this exact surgery a week ago and I haven't told anybody because I've been ashamed. So then she started to share her story and that helped her following, right? So it's a snowball effect. And I feel really honored and privileged that I get to share and help people and that people's lives are transforming as a result.
It's beautiful, Kim. And we live in a world at the moment where there's a lot of bad press around, deservedly so, in my opinion, around, unhealthy use of technology, social media, and, how it can sort of suck us in and, in my opinion, take a big part of our soul.
Yes.
But I don't hear that with what you're saying, right? The way that you use social media and the way that you just explained it, that is the way that I think all of us should be aiming to use social media. Social media is a tool, right? And any tool, we can either whack ourselves over the head with it or we can create a beautiful masterpiece. And it sounds like that's what you're doing. You're using this tool to channel your love. And if we are intentional, if we are mindful, if we are aware and we are connected to this tool to use it for these kinds of purposes, then now it just becomes another channel of our passion, our expression, and our love. And I think you do that beautifully, Kim.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I have one more question here, but before we get to that, before we close up, Kim, I want to give you the space now, as we've been hearing about the work that you do in the world, about your light, about this, powerful mission and purpose and passion that you have around pelvic health and vagina health. What are you doing in the world at the moment that you want to promote to the people listening on this podcast?
Thank you. Yeah, my overriding, I guess, mission is, I think that there is a lot of suffering that happens in association with the pelvic floor. And I want to put an end to that and know that people have options. And if they want to overcome something, they have lots of resources and people that can help them. And I have a few books. I have online programs. As I mentioned, I'm doing a webinar next week on March 9th. I'm not sure when this podcast is going to come out, but on March 9th, there will be a webinar for pelvic surgery success. So when I was going through that process, being a pelvic health professional, being very informed, feeling the shame, feeling the guilt, feeling like, I didn't do this well enough. No one's going to trust me now because I'm resorting to surgery. And I went through all these emotions and also went through the process with a lot of calm, a lot of confidence, and had a very positive outcome, which is not the norm. And so I recognize that as another kind of niche within my niche that needed to be addressed. So I have a free webinar to help people navigate pelvic surgery. And a couple of months ago, I just launched my app. It's called the Buff Muff app. And it is, it's where I direct most people to.
Best name, by the way. That's the best name for an app ever.
Thank you. A lot of people were wanting the reminders. They wanted, everybody's on their phone. That's where most of us have most of our information, right? So I created an app that has a lot of free information for people that may not have the financial means to participate in the membership, but gives people enough knowledge and foundational information to help them get started and understand what might be going on with their pelvic health. And then for people that choose to, there's a monthly membership they can join where they get all it's like, I take a whole body approach. It's not just pelvic floor. We have a whole body here to address. And we have to move and we have to eat and we have to hydrate and we have to sleep. And so I cover as much, I cover all of that, but so those are the two main things that I have going on. And it's actually almost a year ago that my book launched, my book called Your Pelvic Floor. It launched on International Women's Day last year. And I can't believe it's been a year that it's been out. But that, I think, is a really good place for people to start as well, to get kind of the base knowledge. And then I always say, once you're finished reading it, find another vagina owner in your life and pay it forward and have them read the book as well.
I love it, Kim. And what I'll do is, as I always do here, is I'll grab all the information off you. I'll put it, if you're listening, you're connecting, you're feeling, you're inspired by Kim's work, and you want to take this journey, either if you're a female into your vagina health a bit deeper, or you're a male, you have a beautiful woman in your life that you would like to support, please check out the show notes, the episode. When you're there, you'll see the links. You can also leave a review for this episode and what you thought of it. We'd love to hear your feedback. But as we finish here, Kim, I have one more question for you. And the theme, the intention of my podcast is to help people connect back into their deep, deep, deep space of cosmic spiritual love so they can share that love with the world. And I'm interested, Kim, what is your definition for that LOVE word?
I don't know if there is a definition. So here's when I think of the word love, what I feel. I feel an openness. I feel a lovely warmth. I feel an appreciation. I feel a wanting more of. I feel a connection. So I think that there's people, places, things that we can love or appreciate, admire, trust, respect. There's lots of words that I think are kind of enveloped in the word love. So I don't have a definition. I just know how I feel. And those are that's kind of the emotional state, I guess, that I feel.
It's expansive. It sounds like It's expansive to you, Kim.
Yes.
Kim, I love you very much. Thank you for joining me with this chat. Thank you for sharing your light and your love. Listeners, as promised, I told you that she would have a lot of beautiful value and guidance to give you here today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Cosmic Love Antenna. Both myself and Kim love you very much. We're wishing you a wonderful evening, morning, afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Harrison, your lovely host, and we're out. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Cosmic Love Antenna podcast. We hope you enjoyed. Be sure to follow Harrison on Instagram, Twitter, and Clubhouse at Harrison Ma. That's Harrison, Meagher.